Giroux to center. Lundvik shoots. He scores! Johnny Lundvik does it again!
Jarvis in close shot. There's a goal. Seth Jarvis, the 17-year-old, short side, glove side, high, just under the crossbar.
Cutting to the front of the net, and they score. Reese Newkirk along the right wing just took the pass. That was phenomenal patience from Seth Jarvis and the Winterhawks.
Hey, this is Reese Newkirk, and you're listening to the Pucklandia podcast.
Welcome into Pucklandia. Pleased to be joined by Craig Beauchemin, WHL broadcaster for hire. Coming off of a unique assignment of covering the Winterhawks on the road trip, which is why I thought it'd be fun to have you in to chat on what this Portland team looks like, as you've seen more of them lately than anybody here in Portland has. I mean, where do you want to start with that, Craig? Your background with the Broncos and before that, or this Portland swing? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to do a little background, I can do that if you think that's a good place to kind of start off.
Yeah, I do kind of like to get to know the guests a little bit, and find out where you come from, what makes you tick, that kind of thing, and get to know Craig a little bit, and then before we start talking about X's and O's.
Born and raised in Whitehorse, Yukon. Lived there until I was just about 19 years old. I went to college in Belleville, Ontario, at Loyalist College. I took a radio broadcasting program and then a postgraduate sports journalism course. And I started my first play-by-play job was in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. I worked at the radio station there and was calling games for the Battleford North Stars in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and did one season there. Then I went to Powell River in the British Columbia Hockey League, did one season there, 2 years in Penticton with the V's, and then I got hired in Swift Current, and I was there for 4 seasons.
Yeah, the kind of a typical story of trying to work your way up, from junior A, and I think a lot of guys go through that same career path. I mean, it's from the outside, it seems like a lot of work to have to, travel around and relocate frequently to these different places just to try to follow your line of work. But I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast when there's only, it's musical chairs and there's only so many spots, right?
Well, that's just it. I remember in college, our professors really kind of harped on us that you can't be too picky with, where you go, especially at the beginning. If you want to get into, the broadcasting business, whether it's on the TV side or the radio side, you kind of just have to go where the work is, especially for your first few jobs where you try and, like you said, establish yourself and kind of work your way up the ladder, if you want to put it that way. So I got the job in North Battleford. I actually started working at the newspaper there first because a friend of mine from college, Brett Smith, who was working for the Prince Albert Raiders for a couple of seasons, he was the sports reporter of the newspaper there. And then he got a job up in Prince Albert, and he said, if you want my old job, I can tell my boss essentially to just hire you. So I did that, and then I met the broadcaster there who was there at the time. His name was Mike Feeney, and I told him that I wanted to do play-by-play eventually, and he said, well, it's a good thing you're here then, because I'm going to leave after this season. And he did. He told his bosses to hire me, and I got that job. So, it turned out a bit lucky that way with going to the right spot at the right time, and set me off on this path to where I've gotten to now.
Yeah, it seems like, whatever, part of hockey we're talking about on these kind of shows, it's meeting people and cultivating relationships and, trying to, treat people the right way, and it'll come back around to you. And a lot of it's just getting lucky with the right opportunity at the right time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm a big believer in putting yourself out there and making sure that you're doing what you can to help yourself. I send out updated, demo clips to a bunch of guys probably once a year or so. I'll reach out to them and send them an email and say, hey, nice to talk to you again. Can you give a listen to this 8-minute clip or whatever, and let me know what you think? And it just kind of builds that relationship with some guys who are, in the American League or in the NHL. So they're all really receptive to to guys reaching out to them and sort of learning from them. So I've made really made a point to do that and make sure that I'm doing what I can to put myself out there and sort of help yourself in that regard to build those relationships, because you never know when it might come back around and somebody down the line might help you out in a big way.
Yeah. Well, a long time WHL Unfiltered listeners know that's, one of the main purposes of this show is to try to get, WHL broadcasters some exposure and hopefully some work, and when you're in between gigs, and that's kind of what we've done with my co-hosts over there. And this will be be in the same feed, so there'll be a certain amount of crossover there. And I don't know what to extent we've been successful with it, but I guess Jeff Hollick is working games in Calgary with Curly, so there's something, right? So that's a good thing. But that's kind of where we ended up, with you getting to work some Winterhawks games, and kind of what's your broad brush experience with that club here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it was fun. I can't thank Nick Merrick enough for reaching out to me, and it goes all the way back to the summer. He originally reached out and asked if I'd be interested in doing that, and it was kind of funny. He originally only asked me if I could do the last 2 games on that trip in Kamloops and Vancouver, and I kind of looked at it and said, if you want more time at home, like, I can do more games on that swing, even the whole trip if you want to. So he looked into it and talked to his bosses, and we came to the agreement to do the last 5 games of that trip. So it worked out really well, and getting a chance to kind of get back in the saddle and do some games and meet some people with the Winterhawks. A guy like Peter Dewar, who I hung out with the whole time pretty much on that trip, the media guy there, and meeting the coaches and some of the players and that kind of stuff. Just an opportunity to kind of hang out with a new team for a bit and meet some new faces. So certainly really enjoyed it, and can't thank not only Nick but the whole organization enough for allowing me to jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a company podcast. I don't have any direct relationship with the Winterhawks, even though that's the subject, of this show. But it is pretty cool that they set Nick up for that, to get him a little more time at home with the newborn, and that's pretty special. I mean, in this country, we don't get near the maternity paternity time that a lot of places get, that you guys have, in Canada. And so it's pretty cool for the Winterhawks to make that, available to him, to have more time with the family. And then obviously then that made it an opportunity for you to get to call some games. So, I mean, everybody's winning at that point, which is, pretty sweet.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, I can only imagine how hard it must be for him to have to be away from home with the newborn, like you said. And, I know it was killing him, even just being gone for the 4 or 5 days he was gone there. He was sending me some photos of Miles and saying how much he wishes he could be back home. So was more than happy to help out and fill in for him, help out a friend, and help out the team at the same time. It's tough in a position like being a sports broadcaster where you have to be on the road sometimes, being away from family, and to especially mix a newborn child in there makes it even more difficult. So I was really glad to help out, and really happy that I could help him out and allow him to have some more time at home as well. Yeah, and I know that you can relate to being away from family for work reasons, and that's we're all fighting our own battles, but I know you can relate to his position there too. But so this. So you picked up with this team, and I know it wasn't your first game, but I mean it was. I got to listen to your call against Swift Current in the iPlex, and I bet that was a little different animal climbing that ladder and covering the other side. Yeah, it was something I was looking forward to. I mean, I have a great relationship with basically all the players on that team and the coaches. So it was different to go back, of course, and to see a lot of familiar faces before the game. Normally I was up in the broadcast booth, around shortly after 6, and I'd kind of just hang out there while people were filtering into the building. But with this trip, I was able to kind of hang around in the concourse a lot longer than I normally would. So being able to see some old faces and talk to people again, former coworkers in the team store, and billet coordinator, I saw her in the store as well, and team chaplain, some fans that I recognize, some parents of players that were regulars at games, and just a lot of people that you talk to on a regular basis that I obviously hadn't seen for 6-7 months, whatever it was, and getting the opportunity to be back there and see those faces again was nice. And after the game too, being able to see some of the players again, and it was kind of funny. Ryland Gould was the first star of the game, and he was one of the more approachable guys you could say on the team over the last couple of years. He was there, just a really positive, upbeat kid, and he's first star of the game. So he comes out and does his little lap there, and then he goes back in the room, and maybe 30 seconds later, a minute later, he pops out of the room again, and he stands at the end of the bench, and he yells up at me from across the rink, and I look up at him, and he kind of just points at me, and I just had to shake my head after he picked up first star. So, nice to see some of these guys after the game and just get a chance to kind of catch up with them, and went to the coach's office after the game as well, and was able to catch up with Devin Pratt, the head coach there. So it was fun to go back. It would have been nice to get the win there in the shootout, but entertaining game to say the least, and it was nice to get the opportunity to head back there.
Well, and that's a fun story about that the first star interaction, and unique to that type of a building too. You're not getting that at the Saddle Dome, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those smaller intimate rinks can be pretty fun. There's games over the years and some of those smaller places where the crowds are large, and it just gets so loud in there. Compared to some other buildings you get to play in, where whether it's the crowds can be the same size, but the building is just so much bigger and almost cavernous at times, it feels. So those smaller rinks like Swift Current, Prince Albert, they can be pretty cool when the crowd gets rocking, and I felt like there was a really good crowd that game, and they were treated to a pretty entertaining 65 plus minutes, I thought. Yeah,
and that's one thing that the road trip started out a little rough, and if it wasn't already scheduled to send Nick out of there, I think we would have had to do an emergency intervention. The way that because once you got behind the controls there, it seemed like you steered the ship in the correct direction. I mean, I'm kind of that whole trip. I mean, they got a point. I mean, whatever, it was a fun game, but the rest of those games, I mean, Portland pretty much just handled their business. Medicine Hat, Lethbridge. I mean, that was. What was kind of. What were your? Did they play up to kind of your expectations coming into that trip, as far as how well they've been playing overall this year?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me was how many high quality scoring chances they had every single game. And I just kind of thought, if they could even convert on 25% more of those chances, then they'd be undefeated right now. It seems like they get 2 or 3 breakaways every single game. Marcus Nguyen basically gets a breakaway every single game, and so many odd man rushes, shorthanded chances. Saw that with a couple of shorthanded goals against Vancouver, and it's just pretty incredible to see how many chances they're able to create for themselves every single night, and you wonder how they even lost games this season if they play like that regularly. So pretty impressive to see. Just a team that's pretty well built top to bottom. I mean, obviously they roll all 4 lines. They play the 6 defense all game long, and obviously Jan Spunar started all 5 of those games that I was there for, and then he was rock solid. So it's a pretty legit team, and when you've got a team like that, there's going to be thoughts on what they can add to make themselves even better and separate themselves from the pack with regards to looking toward a championship. So pretty impressive stuff, I thought. Was really impressed with the way that they just kind of win in every game and played pretty consistently, and were able to generate so much, and like you said, pretty handily won of those games for the most part.
One thing I've noticed in the last this year so far, I mean, stereotypically we talk all the time about Mike Johnston's teams having really active defense, jumping up in the play, joining the rush, and it seems like, I mean, that's just kind of, we've said that for 10 years or better. But it seems like this year in particular, every time you look down, you see, 73 on the right wing, just pushing, up ice in a hurry. And you see Carter Southern, and that's one thing I think they've really doubled down on this year. Is that a thing that you noticed, that you had to look down and especially with them high numbers too, it kind of throws you off. But it seems like the defensemen are just up in the rush like every time up ice.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the high numbers. That is something totally different that you don't see very often. And I have to admit that having players in the 90s and 70s was a little different, and it did take a little longer to get used to than I think normally. But, you mentioned a guy like Luca Cagnoni. I mean, I just looked at the stats. He had, I think, 13 points in the 5 games that I was there for. So, when you've got a guy who's putting up points like that, it's pretty impressive stuff. A guy who can really just drive things offensively from the blue line. His point production is almost twice as high as it was last year, and that kind of put him on the map getting drafted by San Jose. So to see that year over year production is incredible from an offensive defenseman. And he plays so much every single game. A guy like that's racking up the minutes, and obviously out there every time in the power play, every chance they get to put him out there to try and create something. So having guys like that is, I think, is so key to be able to create offense from the blue line and not just have your forwards trying to do everything themselves. When you've got a guy like that, it's like having an extra forward out there offensively, and he's no slouch defensively either. A couple of great back checks and great stick checks to break up some rushes the other way. So, pretty special player back there in Luca Cagnoni on that Portland blue line.
What did you think about this group of overage forwards that Portland has? I mean, it's pretty rare that you see 320s in the same position, and I think it's pretty unique in that, typically your 20s are more, win faceoffs, penalty kill, leadership, kind of third line kind of guys. But this is this trio of scorers for Portland. I feel like it's kind of, I don't know if I've really seen that kind of a deployment of overage players. I mean, you see a lot more of the league, than those of us that stay in one place. I mean, what's kind of your take on that as far as how they've distributed those spots?
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of what position your 20-year-olds are, you kind of need those guys to be impact players, right? And you're relying on them to not only be leaders, but to lead by example on the ice. And you look at a guy like Gabe Clausen, I saw he was just named Player of the Week. I mean, he had 9 points in 2 games, and over the 5 games that I was there for, he had 15 points in 5 games. So, that's a guy who just drives offense. He's out there winning faceoffs, and he's creating offense. I mean, some great passes on the shorthanded goals that James Stephon scored in Vancouver. And with Stephon, he had a big game in that last one against Vancouver. I mean, a guy who's a point and a half per game so far this season. And I think Jack O'Brien plays a key role in that power play too, just kind of setting up on the flank and then creating offense. So, to have all 3 of those guys producing offensively is so key for a team to have success. If you've got a 20-year-old spot, you can only have 3 guys, and they have to be guys who are doing something, whether that's putting up points or whether it's, playing exceptional defense or being a great goaltender. And for Portland to have 3 overage forwards, they need those guys to produce, and certainly seems like all 3 of those guys are doing that.
So what do you think I guess we already touched on this, but I mean, where do you see this team going? I mean, as they're constructed, I mean, if they're not shooting themselves in the foot like they did, to start the road trip, I mean, kind of, what do you think the ceiling of this team might be?
Well, they're built to win. I mean, there's no question about that. They've got one of the best goaltenders in the league. There are times when it seems like they're just scoring at will and just totally dominating their opponents. And, even if they have to play those tight games like we saw in Lethbridge, like we thought we might with, him and Harris and Mennigan, Schwoonar and Mennigan going head-to-head, they can win those tight games because they've got such a good goalie. So there's no question this team's built to win. It's hard not to look at them as one of the favorites, if not the favorite, in the Western Conference, especially to head to the league final and then potentially win a championship. So, you have to imagine that Mike Johnston wants to really capitalize on that and make a move or two to shore up his team. And, whether that's a huge blockbuster deal or a smaller move to get some depth up front or on D, whatever it might be. I think there's no question that this team is going to try and do some damage this year and try and win another championship. So,
and they haven't added much to this roster. There's only 3 players on this team that weren't drafted or listed by Portland, but 2 of them came from the Swiftgren organization, and when Josh Davies came to town, there was definitely a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement about what kind of player he could be in this type of system. I mean, what can you tell me about Josh Davies? And he's already a fan favorite here in Portland, but you know the player better than the rest of us do.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me really. He's a pretty special mix. I remember his first preseason game with the Broncos. He had a hat trick, and one goal was on the power play, one goal was shorthanded. And there were times when he would have the puck in the corner, and a defenseman would try and knock it off him, and they would just bounce off of him because he was so strong, even though he was 15 years old. And nothing's changed since then to now. He has game-breaking speed. I think straight line, goal line to goal line. I don't know if there's many, if any, players in the WHL that are faster than him. I don't know if there's anybody who's got a harder snapshot than he does. He's had that NHL level shot since he was 15 years old. And, when he gets going, he can really knock guys over. Doesn't matter how big they are. He can go right through them. So he's got that special mix of speed, shot, strength, skill. He's a pretty impressive mix. And, to see him scoring like he did on that trip didn't surprise me. The one that really stands out is the goal in Swift Current 33 seconds in. I mean, when you can beat a goaltender from distance like that on a shot with no screen, no nothing, that's pretty impressive stuff. And he's got that crazy shot that's gonna get him some professional contracts over the course of his hockey career. I don't have any doubts about that. So he's a pretty impressive player. And when he is able to put it all together, which is tough to do, it's tough to be consistent. But when he's able to put all those skills together at one time in a game, he's a guy who can be the biggest difference maker on the ice. And we saw that on this road trip with the amount of points and the amount of goals he was racking up. Hat trick in Kamloops, 2 goals in Medicine Hat. I mean, 6 goals in the 5 games that I was there for. He's a pretty impressive player, and he's sort of living up to his full potential, I think, in Portland.
Yeah, and it seemed like the guys on the other clubs in that swing that know Davies well. It seemed like they weren't real happy to see him come back into town. And it seemed like lots of activity in the corners and in front of the net. Lots of rough stuff, which seems to suit him well.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, that's the kind of player he is, right? I mean, like you said, sometimes there's guys who are good at that and they don't provide as much offensively, but he's a guy who can do that and also provide offensively, which is a pretty rare combination. Sort of that, a perfect example of a bit of a power forward that Josh Davies is. And yeah, I can't imagine, Medicine Hat was too happy to see him back in town. He's made a career of feasting on the Tigers, and then sure enough picks up 2 goals against them when he's back. And, his old teammates having a chance to have to battle against him instead of with him. It's a totally different animal when he's on the other side of the ice. So, I'm sure they're glad they only have to see him once, those Central Division teams, and he's going to be terrorizing the U.S. division for the rest of the year.
Well, and you mentioned that goal, to first shift, in the iPlex, and I don't know if there's money on the board or if that's a thing that the kids at this level do, but I mean, you figure it would have been really easy to be squeezing the stick too hard and be, too amped up to and running through the end boards or something. But that's not the way that went.
No, and I think for him to get that sort of monkey off his back immediately and then kind of be able to relieve that pressure, because he wanted to score in that game and he wanted to make a difference, and sure enough he did, right? First shift, like you said, and it kind of just got that monkey off his back right away and allows him to focus on the game instead of, as the game goes on, getting more tense and then squeezing the stick a little harder, wanting to be a difference maker. So for him to get that right away was pretty cool, and like I said earlier, I just can't stress enough about beating a goaltender like that from distance with no screen is pretty impressive, and he's got a heck of a shot.
Well, I didn't get to see it live, but I heard your description of it. It was pretty nice, very nice. So, what I don't know where I want to go with this. I mean, we talked about the goalie a little bit. I mean, you were fortunate enough to see the goalie of the week and then carry over to a player of the week, but. What were some of the things that Spoonar was doing, that while you were calling the games that kind of solidified that the goalie of the week honor?
Yeah, I think he's just calm. I'm not a huge goalie guy, so I don't know the technical terms and that kind of stuff. But just from what I saw, it doesn't really seem like he's ever scrambly. It doesn't seem like he's ever really moving around a whole lot and having those sort of unnecessary movements to track things through traffic or whatever it might be. And to be calm is so important, I think, as a goaltender, right? Because if you're moving around too much, you might find yourself out of position by a couple of inches, which is all some players need at this level to capitalize on a bad position. So I think he's just calm. I think it allows the team in front of him to play with so much confidence, knowing that if a team has a decent scoring chance, there's a pretty good chance that Schoonar is going to stop it, and they can go right back and try and score the other way. So it's a combination of him playing well. I thought the defense blocked a ton of shots over those games that I saw, and he just is so rock solid back there that it gives the team so much confidence. And it's easy to see why he's up there in the standings with statistics wise and save percentage and goals against average. And to have a goaltender like that mixed along with the offense that the Winterhawks have, what's why it kind of solidifies in my mind that they're a legitimate championship contender.
What was something that surprised you about this team that I'm sure you did plenty of research going into it to see like how they were playing and what kind of caliber guys were on this roster, but what was something that kind of you didn't expect out of this Portland team that you saw?
I know he didn't get a point the last 3 games, but I was really impressed with Diego Bottazzoni, that first game in Medicine Hat. And, there might have been a little extra excitement for him playing against the team that drafted him and whatnot. But, the goal, his second goal from that game was a really impressive shot. Left face off circle. Goaltender's over there. There's not a lot of room, but he goes right upstairs over the shoulder and then puts it in. So, this is a guy who plays a ton of minutes as a 17-year-old on this team and in his first draft eligible season. For him to sort of get that vote of confidence from the coaching staff, it shows a lot of, what type of player that he is. I mean, he's already surpassed his point total from last year in 40 fewer games. So he's got a really bright future ahead of him. And, to be able to have high-end young players like that on a team that's sort of going for a championship, I think is a little bit rare. You don't see a lot of times those kind of younger players are either pushed down the lineup or they don't have those types of players because they've traded draft picks away to get some older guys to really go for it. But to be able to have that mix of high-end young guys to go along with your older players who are producing is a great mix to have. Reminds me of the Prince Albert Raiders when they won the championship and they had Ozzy Weisblatt and Caden Gooley at 16 years old playing, fairly important minutes over the course of that playoff run. So to see a guy like Bottazzoni have the success that he's had as a 17-year-old on one of the best teams in the country, I think is pretty impressive for him, and maybe a guy that I didn't realize how talented he was until I got a chance to see him.
Well, and that ties into that, the way they kind of mix and match on the top 3 lines to where they spread the wealth out, and so they're all going to get and the 4th line too, but they're all going to get opportunities to where you're not buried down the lineup and struggling for ice time. That it's if you have the opportunity, then you can capitalize on it, and that's certainly what Bottazzoni is doing. But yeah, I mean, it's if you had to say what's their top line, I mean, it'd be sometimes it's hard to even say, pick one over the other, right?
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, it's you can win with 3 lines. I mean, I think Swift Current showed that in 2018. They kind of really hammered on the top 9, and then the bottom 3 forwards didn't really play a whole lot, and even their defense, they kind of had their top 4, and then the last pairing didn't get a whole lot of ice time. So you can win that way, but when you're able to confidently put out your all 4 lines, it just helps out so much because it takes a lot of pressure off of the top line. It takes pressure off the second line to know that they can have an extra break on the bench. They can take an extra breather and not have to double shift in tight games as much as other teams might have to. So it just pays dividends throughout the course of the season. It keeps guys a little fresher come playoff time, and they're more ready and more relaxed and rested for what they hope is a long playoff run. So to be able to roll those 4 lines and then get all those guys out there and rest their top guys when need be, when other teams might not be able to in the same situation, that's something that I think is really going to pay off when it comes to the playoffs.
So probably, I do appreciate you giving us some of your time. I should probably, start putting a bow on this one. Is there any other thoughts you had about this Portland team and that road trip that we haven't touched on?
Oh, I just think it's a really impressive team. It's crazy to think that they don't have a home game for, what is it? It's got to be pushing like 30 days in between home games for them. It's crazy to think they knocked out a quarter of their road schedule in one go there. So they have a chance now to play a ton of home games. I think it was 9 of their next 11 games are at home. So, I would just certainly tell fans down in Portland to go check that team out. I think there's no question they're gonna have a long, successful season. They're gonna make some moves, I think, to shore things up and really solidify themselves as the number one contender in the league. So, I love supporting junior hockey. I have so much fun working in it and then getting to see it up close and personal and that kind of stuff. So, I can't stress enough how much I think fans in Portland should go check that team out, especially with so many home games coming up here. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch that team on home ice, and that rink down there in Portland's great. I've only had one chance to go there as a broadcaster last season, and even though it was maybe half empty, I still thought it was a great crowd there at the one game against Swift Current. So, I just recommend fans go check it out. It's going to be a great team, and they're going to have a long playoff run. So, go support them as much as you can.
Well, I mean, you just keep your phone handy. If they lose a couple games, we're going to bench Nick again. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll fly down and pinch hit for a couple of games if necessary here.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Craig, and best of luck moving forward.
Thanks so much, Chad. Appreciate it.